This is the premiere of Through the Glass, an idea that came about not that long ago. It's something that I personally have dabbled in here and there, for example, with my wife down in the basement, and this is our first go at it for real. This is Through the Glass number 1. Before we get started, I want to just say a few thank yous. First of all, I want to thank Lake House Recording Studios for providing the studio, the microphones, the cameras, everything except for me and our guests. So big thank you to Lake House Recording Studios, in particular John Leadersdorf, Juan O'Grady. Thank you guys for being kooky enough to saying yes to this. Also want to thank anyone who's given me ideas and inspired me over the years to explore this format a bit more. So I'm thankful to you. I'm sure your names will come up as we go through time. The person you're not going to see or hear from is Taylor. She is on the other side of the wall handling the cameras, the microphones. Taylor, thank you. It would be cool if we could actually get a microphone on you at some point. I feel like I would like to have you involved in this on some level. So let's see if we can do that. For the time being, if there's an emergency, she's just going to call me on the phone. So you guys might actually see that. So this is Through the Glass. The idea jumped up a notch about a couple months ago. I was doing an interview with Erik Kase Romero for something unrelated. And in our conversation, he and I were talking, just thinking, hey, man, it's just kind of like more like a podcast, what we're doing. And it would be cool to do that. And so, we laughed a little bit. And I said, hey, if it comes to fruition, you can be the first guest. Would you be interested in that? So he was cool enough to say yes when I got the green light to even do this. So I want to introduce Erik Kase Romero. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, man. So this is, I don't know, like shaking off the cobwebs. First of all, thank you.
Yeah.
So let's start off with a toast.
Oh, sure. Cheers.
Here's to Japanese whiskey and good conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Taylor, we poured you one too, so I hope you're cheersing with us. Oh, this is lovely, dude.
It's nice, right? They're changing the game over there. Truly.
That's beautiful. So this is Japanese. Yes. Japanese whiskey from the House of Suntory. Well, established in 1923. Beautiful. When we were together for the interview, I brought whiskey, Scotch whiskey. I think it was a Bowmore.
Mm-hmm.
So we were having a drink and having conversations about that. I was wearing my Scottish Beastie t-shirt. Shout out to my wife who gave me that t-shirt. Although we didn't buy it in Scotland. She bought it when she was in Italy, so go figure. And so we were talking a little bit about whiskey. So it's cool to meet people who like drink it and think about it. So like, what are your favorite types?
I've always liked Scotch. I like the smoky, and I'm not a big sweet in any kind. I'm not a big dessert person or like sweet spirit or a cocktail person. So I always, if I was gonna enjoy a spirit, I don't actually drink very often. I know maybe a lot of people say that, but I usually want to enjoy something. So so Scotch was always something I liked, and then this Japanese whiskey, which is similar to a Scotch in that I think it's smoked.
It's got a little peat vibe, a little smoky vibe, but light, not.
It's a little softer, yeah. But my younger brother, has moved around a bunch. He's in higher education. He's the Dr. Romero, and he's also very into. He on the side bartends and all that, very into like boutique spirits. And I was just up in his. He works at Dartmouth now, so I was just up with him in New Hampshire, and we went on a tour of Japanese whiskey. So I was like, oh, I'll grab a bottle of this for Mike and for the interview.
Oh, it's really cool. So you were just up in New Hampshire?
Yeah.
When?
Tuesday and Wednesday of this week.
We just got back from New Hampshire last month. We took the family up there. Most of the stuff we were doing in our day-to-day was home-based anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Our two kids are virtual school full-time, most of my job is from home at this point. My wife works exclusively from home, so we had planned to do a vacation. We were going to visit family in California and then also family in Florida. That was going to be like the 2020 plan. You know how those plans go. So that was shot out, and then we were talking to friends of ours, and they're like, well, if you're doing everything from home anyway, where does it matter where you are? So don't even think about it as a vacation. Just think about, like, you could just go to another house as long as they have solid internet.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, yeah, shit. So we ended up going exactly what you would, like, this picturesque little house on a lake in the woods in New Hampshire, and it was when the leaves were peaking.
Yeah.
It was peaking right when we left.
I think that's the time of year to go, probably. Yeah.
Dude.
Amazing.
It was really inspiring, really beautiful. Canoeing, fishing. Sorry to Lake Sunapee, we donated a ton of lures and plastics. So sorry.
Unintentionally.
It was my children's fault. It's my children's fault. So those will never ever break down. So if you guys have some sushi and it's a little plasticky, sorry about that. It's beautiful up there.
Yeah.
And and it's. I mean, what was it? 4 hours? How long did you?
I went to Manchester, which I guess is one of the bigger cities in New Hampshire. So it took about. I drive a big old diesel van that can't go very fast, so it took me about 5 hours. But I have some very close friends in Portland where I head a lot, and that's like a 7-ish hour drive. So it felt nice to be doing basically 2/3 of a drive I'm very used to. It felt shorter for some reason because I've driven to Portland when COVID's not happening, a lot. I have a lot of close friends up there, play shows up there a lot, so used to that drive.
And that's New Hampshire?
Portland, Maine.
Oh, okay. Because there's a few Portlands on the East Coast, isn't there? Doesn't Connecticut have a Portland as well? It makes sense for the amount of ports. So I don't know. I can't confirm or deny that, but I know there are multiple. The land of ports. Yeah. Taylor, fact check us on this, please. The bullshit level is going to continue. Yeah. We'll keep pushing the envelope with that. So pre-COVID. So what are you doing this year to stay sane?
Well, my years transformed a lot in each sort of like season, So I had a lot of touring that I had been committed to. I was in the middle of further back, I was on tour in March. On March 13th, I had played Montreal, and we got the lockdown. We could all see what was happening. A couple members of the bands had that I was touring with, like one of them lived with their parents, and they were both older, and we were like, we need to leave. So we played the show, and we all made the decision to leave. Did the 8-hour drive straight back home that night from Montreal. And, crossed the border. And they were like, yeah, good thing you did this. Tomorrow might not have been so easy. So, so did that. I think probably similarly to most people, spent the next month just being kind of like scared and confused and sort of like, what is even really happening? Then, and then I think throughout the summer I laid low. I did some remote mixing projects and did some stuff I could do safely by myself from home, and it was definitely a tougher month for work. But the thing was, I had already been planned on being on tour, so I didn't have a lot of work lined up. I was supposed to be touring all summer for a really good part of the year, so which was a bummer. There was that was going to be really, really great. Hopefully, I think some of it may be rescheduled. But around September, I kind of made the decision to try and start working safely again, producing albums. So I've gotten into the habit of like, sanitizing things in studios I've worked at, working in places big enough that we can be distant and all wear masks if we want. And then I've been getting tested between working with each client. And I usually work for, 4 to 5 days minimum, usually more with a client. So if we all get tested before and get the results before, it's a little, still wear masks and everything, but it feels a little bit more responsible and a little safer. And then there's been some clients that we just agreed we need to wait till things are safer, so it's just been sort of working on what I can in a respectful way to the rest of society. And so we'll see as winter kind of closes in. I had 2 or 3 things recently that I had to postpone because of whether it was people saw their families over Thanksgiving and didn't feel like it was, whatever reason. So, but I'm lucky enough to say that for working freelance, I have the last couple months been able to do a lot more creatively than I would have thought, and that was really saved my mental and emotional health a lot, to be able to collaborate with people again.
Well, there were options that like we didn't know existed.
Yeah.
And of course you have to pick your own lane.
Mm-hmm.
So I know different people have different lanes as far as what they the science that they follow, the aspects of the science they follow, and then how they incorporate that into their lives. And working in the music industry, obviously, you have to have your own protocol. It just seems like you put yours in place quickly. I know here at Lake House we put a protocol in quickly. But then you have, well, what are the other people comfortable with? What are the other people doing? And we were just talking about that while we were setting up. And thanks for helping us set up.
Sure.
Side note, told Eric, I said, Taylor and I are not audio engineers, so there's a good chance that while we're setting up, you're going to have to work as well. So thanks for helping us get the audio right. We're just like, where does this go? What does that plug into? So thanks for that. So it's been revealing in a way.
Yes.
Seeing how people choose, because it is a choice. Anything you do is a choice. How people choose to respond to a time like this, and how they choose to also impose their choice on others. And it's been touchy. It's kind of exposed certain things, mostly good. I mean, I've seen, I just generally try and focus on the positive anyway, but it's exposed some interesting things. So like, what are some interesting things that you sort of come across with sessions or just with artists in general who, let's be honest, artists in general, pretty, not always thinking about the other. It's a pretty egotistical, and I resemble that remark, just being a creator and an artist my whole life. A lot of times you're, my art, I got to get it going. And especially since the world rarely cares and it's hard enough to monetize those things, I think it intensifies that feeling, that ego-ness of it. So this has been an interesting time to have that sort of battling against maybe a safety protocol that may or may not comply. I mean, it's got to be a huge bummer, like you said, having a tour canceled.
Yeah.
There was nothing I enjoyed more when I was younger, was being on the road, even if it was crappiest van and the stinkiest people. Yeah. Literally.
Yeah.
You just carry some Lysol and just spray them when they're asleep. Ryan, you know who I'm talking about.
You do the tour laundry where you just put a bunch of Febreze in a bag and shake your clothes.
That's the move. Yeah. That's the move. It was pre-Febreze when I was touring. It was really just old school Lysol.
A dryer sheet, maybe. That's a good trick. Throw a few dryer sheets in your backpack.
In a pillowcase.
I always throw them in any bag I have when I'm about to go on tour because it does help. It just kind of absorbs some odor.
Take note, people. Poor Ryan. He was a roadie with us on a tour. This is going back a million years. And like any good kid at the time, he was trying to grow dreadlocks, which made a lot of sense, of course.
Yeah.
And it was just a horrible. It was like just one petri dish after the next petri dish, and whenever he would pass out, we would just gas him with fucking Lysol.
Hey, yeah.
Well, it was either that or
cut it off.
we get the snippers. Mm-hmm. So
that's definitely the lesser of two evils, I think. To resort to.
He might have looked better with it shaved. Sorry, Ryan.
But to answer your question about the sessions part, I do have to say I've obviously, like I think most people, had some weird and scary and confusing experiences with how people are choosing to react to what's going on. But as far as my experiences the last 3 or 4 months kind of tentatively and safely attempting to record and produce records, I'm very lucky for the clients that I work with. And I think that most of them were people I had worked with before, only a couple new clients. So I have a very close, when you, even just making a record for a month with someone, you become close usually, for better or for worse. And I feel I feel very grateful for how seriously everyone took it and how transparent everyone was able to be with each other about being safe. And I don't know if it's a niche thing in the genres that I work in, where it's they tend to be kind of indie rock kind of tends to have people that are more politically aware and active and kind of championing people less fortunate than themselves ethos sort of thing surrounding it. I don't know if it's that or just the particular people I happened to have the chance to work with, but I haven't had personally any experiences where I felt unsafe or I felt like anyone was being cavalier with anyone's safety. And I think I always just opt for like, okay, everyone who's going to be here, let's go with the lowest common denominator of who's the least comfortable with anything, and that's what we're doing. And we're, and everyone's been down for that I've had the pleasure to collaborate with the last couple months. So I'm very grateful for that. Who knows what's going to happen, but I am also very lucky that I the last 2 or 3 years I'm mostly able to sort of choose the people I work with, which is a very huge boon and something that, I wasn't always that way, may not always be that way, but I make it very clear when I work with people there are certain things that I just don't have, there won't be tolerance for within the session, and they're usually like, that's great to hear, whatever it is, whether it's hateful speech or like, making people uncomfortable or saying things that make people feel unsafe. I'm like, this is not a space for that, and this is a space we all need to be able to trust each other and be creative. So usually that's like, great, I'm glad you said that, thank you for saying that. But if it ever came to a point where it was like, well, I disagree, I'd be like, okay, maybe it's not the best idea at this moment for us to work together then, and I feel like I have the luxury of doing that right now, which
I think it is a luxury.
It is a huge luxury, yeah.
Because, I mean, what's the essence of art, right? The essence of art is unadulterated, free speech, I guess. And
in a way, yeah.
Expressing yourself in whatever you consider is real and true to you. And as we know, especially as you get older, you realize, oh my gosh, what's real and true? It's like broad. There's a huge spectrum.
For sure.
So it's cool that you've been able to.
Well,
I think it's a delicate line, it sounds like.
And I think going past like what the essence of art is, because I think communication is also mixed in there. Something about, like you said, communicating and sharing and community. Those are all important elements of what art is, because if not, like, we would all just make art for ourselves and never show anyone. So it is that's part of it. And I think what I'm more in the business of is the like unpacking and creating art. And I think vulnerability and therefore trust, which enables vulnerability, are paramount to at least the version I see of how to make art and how to be collaborative. So if there's unspoken discomfort, unspoken distrust, those are toxic things that will undermine the whole process. So I think for me, those are very important to clear up before we begin. I think that we need to have a vocabulary on how to trust one another if we're going to be able to be vulnerable and share ideas that we're like, is this even good? I don't know. Here's a lyric. lyrics, these are very personal things to a lot of people. So I think that for me, and other people have different styles and takes on it, but just for me, like that, my most important thing for me is to clear all that up right away and begin this like language of trust with the person so that we can make something together that we all feel good about.
Yeah, you don't want to be on the... Yeah, I totally agree. You don't want to be on the train or in the car with someone and then halfway through the trip, realize, oh.
Yeah. And that's happened. I mean.
Oh, well, sure. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're probably trying to focus that more and more as you go through your professional life. I know that I'm doing it in my professional life and in my personal life. You get better at tailoring who the passengers are around you. And not trying to create a bubble either of thought. I think that's actually probably dangerous. But just like, hey, I'm looking to have a good time, I'm looking to get something done. Mm-hmm. I have a goal in my mind, whether it's finish a record or whatever it is. But yeah, when you reach that place of trust, then they can tap into that thing.
Yeah.
I see it all the time at the studio. I'm not a recording engineer, thank God. Obviously, I couldn't plug any of this stuff in, so I was like, when you arrived, I
plugged
yes.
one thing in.
Well, that was like the one key thing. Look, dude, you brought a bottle of whiskey and you plugged the one thing in.
I plugged the one thing in.
The hero of the day. But I see it all the time, especially maybe with less experienced artists.
Yeah.
Who maybe they played a ton of gigs, maybe they've written a ton of songs, but then you step into the studio with an engineer or a producer, the headphones go on, the microphone's really close, and someone's staring at you like, okay, go. And there's like a psychological that can occur, and if you're not comfortable with the person you're with, it's a psychological thing that closes you down, but it's also a physiological thing too, right?
And an emotional, it's all tied. Yeah.
It closes you up.
Absolutely. And That's what I was talking about with like that infrastructure. Like if you develop that infrastructure of communication and trust before you ever get in that situation, because you're absolutely right. You put the headphones on and you hear yourself through the expensive mic and you can hear your mouth sounds and all these things. It's an uncomfortable place to be. It feels very exposed. It feels very naked. And if you have a relationship, and this is just from my perspective, if I have a relationship with that person who's now in this very uncomfortable environment and they finally have to make big decisions about this thing they worked so hard on and care about, and you're like, can disarm the whole thing and be like, oh yeah, remember when we like talked through this? So like, let's start with that part we talked through. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember. And then you can just kind of dive into it and you're like, oh, this is familiar. Even though part of this is very alien and uncomfortable, my dialogue is familiar. I know what we're doing. I know what the plan is. I know what we intend this to be. Let's just start, you know? And
yeah, it takes you out of that intimidating space, because it is intimidating recording.
Absolutely.
Whether you're in a basement studio or you're in this studio or your studio, it's super intimidating. And especially if most of your experience is like rocking out at parties or with your friends, or, you know, stage monitors at the club hissing along with like people clinking bottles. You have like this very beautiful softening effect around your voice or your insecurities. It's like, nice.
Yeah.
But then it's the total opposite in a studio. And I should explain. I should say, like, so we're in the same studio, but like many studios, isolation is already a thing.
Yes.
So having a control room, which is what I'm sitting in, isolated from a live room that you're sitting in, that's often a thing. It doesn't have to be a thing, but it's a thing in a studio like this. So the fact that we're able to do a video podcast in isolation with our masks off, still looking at each other, obviously through the glass, but I'm stoked, man.
It's a luxury.
Like,
Another luxury.
Again, thank you, John. Thank you, Juan. Like, just super cool. Super cool. I'm going to ride this as long as I can. Hopefully they don't kick me out, and then it has to go to my basement over Skype or something, and that's just going to be shitty. But so you said, you know, you're lucky enough to be choosy about a lot of the artists. So you've got a long list of people, and a lot of them local people.
Sure.
And I think about the term local. I feel like it has like a negative connotation, like generally, like, oh, like local musicians, and maybe it does in some parts, but freaking Asbury Park, Monmouth County, this area has been top notch forever. Mm-hmm. I came up playing shows, you know, probably 14, 15 years old in Asbury, and it was just always a place. Yeah. Always a place where the level was high. Yeah. Even if it was like something was really like off the rails crazy, that level was high too. But you know, you've traveled around, I've traveled around, and you see sort of the level of local talent, and I'm always like super stoked and prideful about Asbury Park and the surrounding towns. I say Asbury Park just because it's like the flag is in here, but you know, it's the surrounding towns, whatever it is, Ocean, Neptune, Tinton Falls, you know, there's myriad towns close by because they're all so small, but this town has just kicked ass for so long. So the local artists here, I mean, ultimately the quality that comes out of here is world-class quality, and you've worked with a lot of them. I wasn't even aware of all the ones that you had worked with, so like I geeked out a little bit. I'm like, oh, let me actually just Google your name. So I had never done that.
Oh gosh.
Well, I didn't. We won't talk about that other stuff, but so I was just going through like the list. I'm like, oh, like, you know, all friends, and I didn't know that you'd worked with Nicole Atkins. So she and I went to high school together.
Wow.
So shout out to Nicole. I was actually planning on calling her. So Nicole, I want to get you on the show. I know you're down in Nashville, but I don't know if that's full time. Hopefully you're coming home. She's a Neptune City girl. So next time you're in Neptune City, I would love to have you on the show. But yeah, Nicole and I, we went to high school together. We kicked ass in St. Rose High School's adaptation of The Sound of Music. Oh. So shout out to The Sound of Music.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were both Von Trapps. So, you know, we were either in like lederhosen or pajamas pretty much most of the performance. So we got to connect, and she's so cool, such a sweetheart, and really one of the first people. So a lot of us were playing music, and I was grinding in my own way, but one of the first people after high school that I saw like really grinding,
Yeah.
To the point where it's like, okay, I don't want to be a big fish in a small pond.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go for it. And I'm going to gig 5 nights a week. I don't know if I have all the details right, but I would talk to a lot of your friends, Nicole, even if you and I weren't talking a lot at that time, just because our lives, had gone different ways, but always grinding. So whether it was like a pub or a proper club or just some junky place that probably could care less if they have music in it, playing, making connections. And she just kept pushing.
Yeah.
And then I remember seeing her at the, I forget what festival it was. Radiohead was the headliner.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, we got to get there early because
Yeah.
Nicole's playing. And very Jersey move. She came out, her and her band were in like pork roll, egg, and cheese sandwich outfits. Or maybe there was one person was pork roll, another one was egg, another one was cheese. So if you're not a Jersey person, that's a very a staple breakfast, maybe like post-party breakfast. I haven't had one in a million years, but I just recognize it as being like a very Jersey thing, the pork roll, egg, and cheese. And they came out like in these freaking costumes. I was like, yes.
That's
She's
awesome.
still cool, still silly. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I want to get her on the show. So tell me a bit about working with Nicole.
Nicole's great. I think, aside, anyone that is familiar with her knows, she has this incredible, naturally amazing voice, that just like commands, but aside from that, I think, I did a few projects with her. I think some of them were collaborations with other artists. Some of them were singles. I engineered a cover of a very slow version of Dancing in the Dark, which really was interesting to hear those lyrics maybe in a way that kind of evokes more of what they're actually saying, which is really beautiful. I loved her take on it, and I was like, I never thought about the lyrics to this song. They're actually very intense. But the thing that I enjoy the most about her is she's the choices she makes and how sort of fearless and how fearless she is about being creative or making big decisions that might seem like a risk. I think that was very inspiring and very impressive about being in the room with her, and just like feeding off of that energy, it makes everyone else more willing to make big choices too, and sort of push the boundaries of what we're doing, and I really did enjoy the runs of sessions we got to do together.
I saw that early on too. Like I said, just leaving the small pond.
Yeah.
And whether it's even just to New York or further, and just going for it and ensuring that, well, no matter what, I'm going to play certain nights a week, maybe every night, maybe more than once a night.
Yeah.
Because there's really, especially at the time, pre Instagram live, it's like, if you had to be out there performing.
I think
nothing replaces that too.
Barring the pandemic, I still think that a lot of bands I work with, or just people I know that I'm friends with within music, have always, there's always been discussions about like PR and getting your Pitchfork review and how much these things mean, and they mean something. It's hard for me to gauge how much because I'm kind of in a different area of the music industry, but putting yourself in front of people relentlessly is one of the only things I've seen that has as close to a linear progression as anything else. It's like if you keep putting yourself in front of people, if it's 3 people, you meet those 3 people after the show, you talk to them, and the next time they bring 1 friend, next time it's 4. You know what I mean? Like that is one of the only versions of how to grow your business as an artist that I've seen that is undeniably successful.
That's the grind.
That's the grind.
That's the real grind.
And a lot of people, and I hate to say this, I think a lot of people maybe get bummed out about that and want to try to find a different way. And there are people who've been creative and found different ways that maybe sometimes had to do with luck or whatever. But the people that I have such profound respect for as artists have put that work in, and I don't think there's a replacement for it.
There's no replacement because, this studio and you, often we're capturing an artist pure, but there's no end to what you can do in a studio. George Martin probably set that rocket off into space with the Beatles. It's like, well, who cares if you can recreate it live? Mm-hmm. And I totally agree with that. I'm not a purist about anything. So it's like you want to go off the rails and just make something insane that you can't even reproduce in a studio because you don't even remember what shit you used.
Yeah.
I think that's very cool. But at the end of the day, if it's a band, if it's in like the rock world, if you can't like just kick it live, or if it's something you can break down and just break someone's heart, like strumming on a couch, then I think it's what separates the real stuff from, you know, you have a lot of ambition and a lot of good ideas, but if you just can't turn it on in front of one or many ones of people, it's a good separator. So the live show is still like, that's the real test.
And yeah, there's an undeniability to something live. You know, there's no, well, I guess now maybe with tracks and stuff.
let's not say that.
But I would say that an authentic live performance, there's not much to hide behind. And I think that your art and the very skeletal elements of it and your performance and your ways that you choose to connect and communicate are plainly laid out. And I think that that's beautiful. And I think that I always have a thing, you know, when we're working on an album with someone that maybe we are making choices that would be difficult to recreate live. My spiel with that is like, they are different mediums. And I think it's important to understand and unpack what makes those mediums unique. You know, like a recording, you can come back to many times. People often do. If you have a song you like, you listen to it over and over and over again. So there's inherently a microscope on it. And there's these kind of creative choices that you can make. Like, for instance, I can make the choice to just stop everything, cold cut it in Pro Tools, and the song will stop for a second. You couldn't, it's not possible live. Or a fade out, something that's only possible in a recording. And I'm like, these are choices that are leaning into this medium. And do you have to make them? No, but they make sense to consider. And then live is not something that you can revisit, I guess, with, you know, a live recording or a stream, maybe. But the idea is that you have that moment, and there are things you can lean into totally. You can stop a song in the middle of it and talk to someone right there. These are things that are just totally different than the medium of recording. And I think once you see people realize, like, oh, like there are different ways to lean into these two things that are unique and sort of consider the idiosyncrasies of each, that's when you can start to really, like, blow it up and find out what makes you you and how you want to do that. And I think that that's great.
And the studio and working with a producer like yourself, that's the time to do that too. I mean, I really haven't met too many artists who are like, oh, well, I want to make sure that the end production is exactly how it's going to sound on stage. That's a thing, and that's cool, but you could do so many different things. I love hearing a record that's avant-garde and then seeing a stripped-down version of it live, and then seeing some intimate performance of the artist playing with a piano or just an acoustic guitar. I think it's one of the cool things that in pop music I've seen. I don't listen to a ton of pop music. I probably listened to more in the last few years than I did my whole life, but that's nice. A lot of those singers, you see them, and then they'll do these, even if it's like some cheesy talk show, but it's just them and their, the Yamaha.
Especially the ones who really have it, who can really kill it live, like the ones who can really sing.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I'm getting
when you see that, and you're like, oh man, this is amazing. Like I love that moment of pulling the curtain back a little on the sparkly production and being like, wow, this person, their songs were, I knew they were great. The songs were great as they were, but to hear them in this way is like, wow, what a cool other way of communicating that. And you really can do this thing. That's amazing.
It's smart too. I think if you're that artist or you manage that artist, it's like hell.
I agree.
Because let's be honest, in the studio you can make things happen that are just that are unreal. I remember the first time I noticed that was, and I'm not going to remember her name. Going back like 20 years, pop singer. She was lumped in with all like the bubblegummy pop singers. Okay. Christina Aguilera.
Oh, she can sing. Yeah. Yeah.
But in the beginning, it was, I think the focus was on some other things.
Sure, yeah.
In the beginning of her career. And then I saw something on TV. And I was like, holy mackerel.
Yeah.
It was like operatic. Killed it.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
She's virtuosic. Probably a level beyond even what I was just even imagining. We're talking about, she's like an exceptionally gifted singer.
It was the first time I saw it, too. Like that separation of like, I mean, we're talking about pop music right now, but you could apply it to anything. The pop singer sort of stepping out of that pop sound and the pop look and the emphasis on look and all that, and just having a voice that is like a mountain coming at you. So cool.
Yeah.
And it forces the song, too. You mentioned before with Nicole doing the Dancing in the Dark version.
Yeah.
Which I would totally agree with. Like, the production on that song when it came out, I don't know, was that like in the 80s or something?
Trying to think of that.
Sure, there's gonna be a lot of Bruce people who are gonna be
very mad at us.
me.
Yeah, we're in Asbury Park and don't know the year.
But the production on that was very like of the time.
Oh yeah.
But that song, when you hear like adaptations of that song, or even him and his band doing it like a little slower and stripped down, that is one of the most beautiful songs.
It's heavy too.
Ever.
The lyrics are heavy.
Heavy.
Yeah.
Which, as we know, he's capable of.
Yeah.
But when you strip away that 80s production
yeah.
on it, you're like, oh my God, this song. It instantly made me want to go home and find out which capo setting sat with my voice and do my own version of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, what's up?
What's up, Bruce? I
have a good story about that, which is I started working down here, and I'm from like Central Jersey, which is a thing, which will there's no one here to disagree with us, so I'm saying that's a fact. Central Jersey absolutely exists. I grew up there.
Well, we're right in the center of the state right
now.
Aren't we in Central
I would say
Jersey?
This is like the shore. To me, there's a lot of
We're already
New
arguing
Jerseys.
about this. I'm just going to let you talk about
Sure,
it.
But whatever. I grew up near like New Brunswick, south of New Brunswick. And I also didn't go to the shore very much other than to like, when I was in like 8th grade in high school, my mom would drop me off at the Saint to play the show my band was playing, and then that was it. So I wasn't around here very much. And, I knew the mythology of Bruce Springsteen and all that and like know a bunch of the songs. But when I started working down here, there's this very specific Jersey Shore thing where everyone refers to him as Bruce like first person. And it took me about a year to decode that, where I was just like working in all these sessions. Everyone's like, yeah, and Bruce did this. And I'm like, who is this guy everyone knows? And I'm like, is this like, what, a session musician I don't know?
Yeah, he was
or something?
a beloved assistant engineer.
And then I'm like, oh, they all just talk about him in the first name basis. It's like a whole thing. And so I thought that was funny. And
that's pretty cool of him. However, he was not like my introduction to the Jersey sound, which I'm not sure if anyone, under a certain age would even know what the Jersey sound was considered back in the day. I'm an old guy, so let's just put that out there in case you couldn't tell. The Jersey sound, it's a rock and roll thing, but there's horns. There's a certain kind of tempo and this upbeat drumming style, and my introduction to that, the thing that I fell in love with, of course, Bruce Springsteen, great. Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes.
Sure.
That was what crushed me. My dad was a fan. Both my parents were fans. I used to play the hell out of that 8-track. It was on 8-track. Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, Hearts of Stone album. It's still one of my favorite albums of all time.
Wow.
That opening track, just heavy, and then the drums come in, very punk rock in a way.
Mm-hmm.
That might have been Max Weinberg from the E Street Band on that record, actually. So someone, I'm sure, will correct us on that as well. But it is my goal, so I'm putting it out there to get Southside Johnny.
Well, we recorded a record with them here.
I know.
Yeah.
I've heard some interesting stories about that, and I don't think I could tell any of them. But Eric Bennett has a couple good one-liners about those sessions.
Well, my favorite part was that the manager was also very into international soccer, which I am as well, or football. And our two teams that we both support, he supported an Italian team named Juventus, and I support a Spanish team named Real Madrid, played each other in like a semi-final or final of the Champions League during the sessions. Oh my gosh. So we were like both very excited to like take a break and watch the game, but then we were sort of like enemies while watching it, and that was a great little memory during that session.
Mr. Prinzo.
Yeah. Yes.
Mr. Prinzo, please. Let's get Southside on this show, please. So were you like wearing the scarf? Are you that guy? Is it even called a scarf?
Sure. Yeah, there's some, yes. But I didn't wear my jersey or anything like that to the session. And I think that year, my team, Real Madrid, won a lot in the last 5 years, but I think that year Juventus beat them. So I was, silently...
Was he in your face about it?
No. Very mature. It was good. It was very very respectful, but I did not wear my jersey the following day out of
Well, you don't
shame.
want to rattle you don't want to rattle the manager of the big rock star who's in.
No, and Joe's a great guy. Really, really enjoyed the time we spent.
He is
together.
cool. We've
Yeah.
only chatted with him once or twice. He reminded me of like just about all my Italian uncles, so I really connected. Which is why I was surprised he wasn't aggressive with you the next day. I figured there'd be some trash talk or something, which is a strong Italian tradition.
Maybe to someone else, but I enjoyed very much all interactions I've had with him. So it was good. I was just glad to have another person that watched football.
Yeah, so tell me about that. So I've only come to know a little bit more about the sport, like most Americans, just in the last few years. But you kind of grew up with that. Your dad, when we chatted last time over in North, you talked, that really kind of gave you a lot of your work ethic. You know, having the dad who would just, wasn't letting you score on him, wasn't letting you look great.
Never.
Just having like that aggressive, hey, life is hard, life is cold. My dad was that.
I love it.
Times 1,000. So let's talk some trash about our dads. Hey, Neil.
I got anecdotes, but I don't have anything truly negative to say about my father. But he's an immigrant from Spain, came over a little later in life. I think he was 17, and built houses and full on American dream story. And but I just grew up watching and playing soccer because it was ubiquitous. It was just like the only thing, And my dad loves all sports way more than me. And my older brother kicked college football, kicked for Dartmouth. There's all the others, but
very cool.
For us, it was just like he coached us in soccer. And
Wait a minute, so he played football, as we call it in America,
American
but he was
football.
still a kicker, so he was keeping it real.
Well,
like
that's
in the
how
soccer tradition.
So my older brother Carl, from what I understand, was obviously playing soccer, football. I call American football hand egg. Or sometimes I call it wrestle.
Hand egg? What?
Yeah, it makes more sense. You don't really use your foot in that game, and it's not a ball; it's an egg.
And so you made up this term?
Yeah,
or is this
hand
like
egg.
a thing?
And then my friend from Manchester, UK, Francis, has coined the term wrestle-chess, which I think might be the greatest name for American football that I could ever imagine. So shout out to Francis. I love you and I miss you.
Wrestle-chess.
Wrestle-chess
It's
is
got
great.
It really flows nicely.
It feels good to say. But so I guess my older brother Carl, who I think he was in high school in the late 80s, he, grew up playing soccer and got to high school and all the cool kids were joining the football team, and he was like, well, I can definitely kick the living daylights out of a ball. And he could. I think he kicked some serious, I think he might have records at our high school still. He kicked some really far field goals when he was freshman and sophomore. I don't know too many specifics, and I don't want to misquote it, but he ended up going to college and kicking for Dartmouth, and he can still kick the living daylights out of anything.
That is no easy task. I stepped on a real football field once. I was in high school on a trip, with a class trip or something. We were in Indiana. I don't know what stadium we were in. And they like, oh, you can kick field goals. They had it set up probably on the nothing yard line. I felt like the biggest loser. Like, it is really hard to do.
Yeah. It's not too different from the technique, a certain technique of kicking a soccer ball. But I've done it a few times messing around, like on the turf field. They would have, I'd be playing soccer and we'd have the posts above it and get a football out. And
what's your first? I know Don't tell me.
Well, I guess isn't it like an extra 10 yards from whatever line you're on? So maybe like
20, it's however deep the end zone is. So let's call it 10.
Yeah, like 20, 30 yards I could probably do.
That's serious. I was on like 5, so I was just trying to kick like a total of 15 yards.
But I've also been kicking a ball since I was like 5 years old, so I think that it's muscle memory at that point.
I think I just didn't have the muscle. I think that was the key word I might have been missing.
I don't know, but yeah. So it's one of the only great interests I have outside of music is playing and watching soccer.
So who influenced you? Was that your dad? Who?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it was on all the time growing up, Univision or whatever on cable, just watching every game. And I grew up and he supported the team Real Madrid, who's not actually from the part of Spain we were from, but they were sort of like the Yankees of that era. They were just really winning a lot. And he grew up like, sort of with this romanticized, like, this is my team. So when he came over here, we would just always watch it. And kind of never stopped. I love the sport. I think it's beautiful and creative and fluid, and I think it has a lot of the things that I like about athleticism and sports in general. There's things I don't like about organized sports as well, but it has a lot of the things I'm here for, and I really enjoy watching it. And people surrounding me have been forced to also enjoy. My wife is like, I don't think ever watched soccer before we got married. Now she's like, I don't know if she actually is that into it, but she'll watch the games with me and doesn't choose not to. Yeah, so.
Which I think wives do just in general a lot with their husbands. Like if the tolerated list that my wife deals with me, it's like a scroll.
Yeah, it's like soccer and like buying gear I shouldn't be buying are the two things that I just feel such shame that Lisa has to deal with.
Maybe you should have a couch. Something to think about.
No.
Have you ever been to a game in over in Madrid or any other place in Europe?
So, okay, good question. I've gone to Spain a lot in my life because we go visit my I saw a family over there, and then recently I've toured a lot in Europe. Interestingly, the majority of the times I travel there, it's in the summer, which is the off season. So because of school growing up and then college, and then eventually I would travel with my wife, who is a choir director and a teacher, so she's tied to the sort of school schedule as well. So all the times I've been to Europe, with the exception of once or twice that I've gone by myself or when I've been on tour, I've been unable to see live games. But I've gone to almost every stadium in the country, of the La Liga, like Primera Division, top division teams. I try whenever I'm in a city in Spain to go to the stadium and do the tour. And then when I was in
there's no game going on.
Yeah, you can just kind of go see the stadium and see their trophy room and stuff. And
that's cool.
And then when I was did a tour of the UK. We did a pretty extensive tour of the UK in 2018, and I saw we were hitting a ton of cities that had sort of like legendary stadiums, and I made it a point to like get up super early each day and try and see the stadium. But the couple times I went by myself, I was able to go see some games. But I've never seen Real Madrid play in Madrid. I saw them do exhibitions in the US, I've seen whatever, but never gotten to see them play in their stadium. But I will one day. I hope.
Quick update. Taylor.
Yeah.
Dancing in the Dark, 1984.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we were in there.
Absolutely.
I mean, 80s.
There's definitely like, I'm not even going to say, never mind. I'm not going to say what I was going to say.
let's not say
I don't want to mess anything up.
Thank you, Taylor. That's why I want to I would love to have a microphone on her so we could just sort of.
The fact check.
The fact checker, the bullshit queller.
Yeah. We all need that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I need my family is that for me, for sure. I got to see a soccer game, football game, whatever you want to call it, and I was touring in Germany. Well, a few countries, but we were mostly in Germany at the time. I was a kid. I was I just turned 18.
Wow.
And we're touring over there, and whatever city we were in, the guide we'd have like a different guide depending on where we were, and it could be anywhere from like a really nice professional person to a raging alcoholic.
Yeah.
Who's just squatting in buildings and says, you have a place to stay, and they just break down a door and they're like, yeah, it's your apartment tonight. So we can get into all
very
that.
Euro vibe.
Very Euro. And you're not going to tell some like drunk German guy, by the way, anything otherwise. Like,
yeah, you're like, listen, Hans,
they
like, whatever
love
you say.
fist fighting. It's like, dude, I'm just happy to not be in college right now. I'm happy to leave college and be here. So we went to a match. It was maybe Wuppertal and Dortmund or something like that. I'd never, ever, ever, ever. It must be like what going to the Super Bowl is like.
Yeah.
It was off the charts. Not even once, just the getting to the stadium, the trains, the pilgrimages of people who walk, random sausage and beer stands along the way. You are so partied out by the time you even get to the stadium. It's amazing you even get there at all. And I mean, it was violent. There's fights everywhere.
Yeah, it's the only big sport. Imagine all our sports packed into one.
I can't imagine being a player or a ref. I mean, a couple people were like throwing smoke bombs at refs.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was it was violent. It was like a war zone. But amazing, of course. And, I was 18, so I'm like, this is amazing. This is like basically like the hardcore shows I was playing. It reminded me of like a gigantic mosh pit or something.
It's like visceral.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And there's like maybe 10, 15 minutes left in the match, or 10 minutes, and the guy's like, come on, let's get out of here. We're like, what are you talking about? We're just starting to learn the songs.
Yeah, no.
You know, and,
you don't want to be there when it ends.
And he goes, that's exactly what he said. You don't want to be here when this ends.
Yeah.
And we're like, come on. You know, we were like little babies. No, we're going. Okay. And as we're leaving, we get outside the stadium, and I don't remember the amount. I'm sure, you know, memory always adds hyperbole, but like there must have been like 100 like security guys in full riot gear, you know, the shield.
Yeah.
Just standing there, just waiting for the game to end. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, you're right. We're such wusses. Like, we have no business being here. Let's get out of here. But it was so lively. Mm-hmm. And is there that kind of, I mean, I don't want to harp on like a negative and talk about violence and all that, but like soccer fans are like, they're a little crazy.
I think there's
What's going on with that?
I think there's idiosyncrasies to the different countries and leagues, but I think that obviously the passion level is very high over there. I think like a good example would be like the team I support, Real Madrid, like their rival is Barcelona in Spain. Not even a championship game. Like whenever they play each other, something like 30 times the amount of people that watch the Super Bowl are watching that game. That's just a league game. So like to understand the scale and gravity of the amount of people who are invested in this sport, being Americans, where usually our scale is like we're the biggest, we have the most, to just try and understand like no, like the Super Bowl as being like a huge thing, or the World Series final, like that's very myopic compared to the amount the world cares about that sport. But and European soccer and some South American soccer are truly the cream of the crop. But it depends. It's different. I think I think in the UK, there's some really intense sort of like drinking violence, the firms, like these sort of like ultra intense fan clubs that fight each other. And so there's a lot of that over there. I haven't seen it too much of it in Spain. Obviously, people care about it a lot, but it seems maybe a little more chill, which is Spain style.
I was gonna say
they take naps.
I've been to Spain.
They have like a national nap. You know, I mean, there's no one chiller than that.
You don't want to get punched and not look good when you go out in Spain. Like I felt like I never felt so ugly in my entire life when I was with my buddy Bill, and we were traveling around for a little bit when we were younger, and we were in Barcelona for a bit, and I was like, dude,
that's a very cosmopolitan city too. Really interesting. You know,
we called it the Busted Honky Tour. Like, I don't know. Can we say that? Like, I don't know what I'm saying. But
sure.
Yeah, I have pictures of us holding up the Busted Honky Tour sign.
Wow.
Like, I'm like, screw it. Let's just go for it. Let's just wear the sweatpants and not even try.
Just commit to the
Well, if you're going to try, thing. You know you're going to lose anyway. Like, I've even been to Italy where I'm like, I think someone's making fun of my shoes. I'm like, so you just don't even try after a while.
I think Italy actually, and I'm not sure because there's certain things that are very similar about Spain and Italy more than... There's
totally
more than any other countries in the EU.
Totally.
But with soccer, I do think they have some more intense rivalries and violence around. I remember watching a whole documentary about Roma and Lazio and about how like there's just like people who've spent their entire lives like, you know, bleeding for these clubs, and like like when they play each other, it doesn't matter who wins. It's just like we're, you know, really intense. And then Germany, I have a lot of good things to say about their league. I think that if anyone, I always tell people if they're interested in getting into, I want to start watching soccer, where do I start? Because there's so many leagues. It's not like you just watch the NFL. It's like there's a Spanish league, and then there's a English league, and French, and Italian, and German. I say to watch the German league because other than the team Bayern Munich, who kind of wins most years, the rest of it is a pretty level playing field. So if you just arbitrarily pick a team, it might be a really fun season to watch. You know, it's just very competitive, and they play very, once you get into like some of the like nuance, they play very constructive soccer where it's like not as much the like defend, knock people down and kick the ball as far away as you can. It's very creative and passing and movement and speed and shots from far away. So it's an exciting league to watch. The majority of the teams are very evenly matched. I think the Bundesliga is a really, really great place to start if you're interested in watching soccer. You know, you just kind of close your eyes and pick a team and go, you know.
Bundesliga.
Yeah. That's right. their top flight league.
Maybe they want to get a sponsorship on this podcast.
Yeah, man. German
Which I should say,
if
anybody wants to run a commercial or an ad on this podcast, please reach out. If you have a question about this podcast, reach out. If you want to complain about something, please reach out. If you want to shed some praise which no one does. People usually complain. But whatever you want, reach out. You could just reach out through the studio, Lake House Recording Studios. I check all the email. I check everything. So if you have something to say, or maybe you have an interesting guest, someone you want to sort of suggest that we have a conversation with, I'd be interested in hearing that. Always looking for things to inspire. And speaking of which, what or whom was that for you, like, that got you, regardless of if it's a sport or music, like, sort of crafted you? What were the big crafters in your life?
That's a great question. I think there's a couple like eras of my life that are probably, there were different people, but I mean, my mom is a musician, so I would say that's probably the earliest. My mom's an organist, like church, or like with the feet and pedals and stuff, not B3 rock and roll, like church organ, which is a really complex instrument to play. And I just always grew up with an organ in the house and a piano in the house, and it was around a lot. So definitely a huge part of it. I remember very young telling her I wanted to learn drums. I was like, I want to play punk music with my friends and I want to play drums. And I was probably 10 or something. And she was like, that's all fine, but you have to take a year of piano before you learn any instrument. And I was like, and I did. And I begrudgingly took a year of piano lessons, and did it. And day 365 was like, all right, ready for drum lessons. Let's go. So we went to the local music, lesson place in town. I'm trying to remember what it was called at that point. All I know is that the owner was a guy named Chuck, who...
Was this in New Brunswick?
No, it was in Monroe Township, where I grew up. Oh. And he definitely would be one of the main catalysts for my entire life. He was, just a very kind person who loved music, kind of played all instruments pretty well, and gave me some drum lessons, told me like, hey, you're getting good. I'm going to pass you on to a cool teacher. But he would always be there. He let me, my first band, record there, kind of like, he was like, come on in and we'll just turn some mics on and record it. Like, just be creative. And I remember I wouldn't realize till much later how giving and how important that was to me. And he actually passed away when I was in college from lupus. And he was a very meaningful person in my life. And I will never forget the impact he had on me.
Well, that's like the folly of youth, right? You're never really aware of what you're getting fed. Mm-hmm. You're just like...
You're just going.
Just consuming, and that's cool.
And I remember being like, I also want to learn guitar. He's like, all right, cool. We'll just... Every other week we'll do guitar and then we'll do drums. And it wasn't like a big deal, and he would always like... it was... Sometimes lessons were expensive, and he'd always like make it work with us. It was very like not about the business element of it. It was very about like, I want young people to be excited about playing music, and he lit anywhere that there was a fire that I was interested in, whatever instrument it was, he was like, how can we help you do that? And by 11 or 12, the fact that I was like able to, I remember when my parents, for Christmas bought me like a couple $100 drum set from Guitar Center. I've been taking lessons for a couple of years or something. And he went with them to Guitar Center and came to our house and set it up and like put the heads on it and did that, didn't have to do that. And really great.
He was a curator.
Yeah, he cared, which I think set a big tone for like what would become very important to me.
Chuck,
yeah. And so him, later on in college, I went to college for music ed at TCNJ, and my focus was in percussion. So my private teacher there named Bill Trigg was an incredible musician, but also similarly a very caring and giving person who was a resource for anything I needed. And he had a big impact on me. And then also while I was there, my pivot to getting into recorded music, I had been already messing around with it in high school. Like I'd record my friends on my 4-track tape machine or whatever, whatever I could get my hands on at a pawn shop or whatever, I would try and record on it. I needed to pay my rent. So I got a job. I was like, well, if there's a job in music that they have for like, through the school's database, I'll find that. And there was record the stuff in the concert hall, which I was like, great. All my classes are in the concert hall anyway, in the music building anyway, that'll be great. And I started working for a guy named Mark Kalinowski, and he, within a year or so, would like let me work over the summers and sort of like loan me microphones to experiment with, let me teach me things. And he ended up probably being the contact to Lake House, where when I eventually graduated and started like assisting and interning, how I met John was through him. So, and then after that, yeah, John and Lake House were the first 7 or 8 years of my career straight. I mean, early on, I was working 100 hours a week, just here and before this building in John's house. So
yeah, this building isn't nearly, the studio isn't nearly as old as people think it is.
Yeah.
When was this built?
2013.
Yeah,
it's
hysterical.
All of it. Yeah.
It's hysterical.
Yeah.
People think they never think that. It's always like, huh, really?
Yeah. And then John, a huge part of it too. I mean, it's so many of the people I know and so many of the relationships I've been able to make that still feed my career and stuff had a lot to do with John and this place. So I would say probably those 4 people would be some of the bigger landmarks in terms of people who enabled me and gave me resources when they didn't really have to, but like made this extra effort because they saw how much I was like, I will do all of it. Like, let's go. If you want to do, like, you want to tell me more stuff, you want to give me more things I can do. I was very, very motivated to spend every waking second I have doing whatever that was.
That's everything. People, yeah. I think a lot of people mistakenly think, and this isn't like a young person or old person thing, I think this is just a person thing, mistakenly think that your aptitude for something is king. Your skill level at something is king. Mm-hmm. Your IQ, I was in the gifted program, like whatever it is. It's not that at all. It's your openness to learning and how voracious you are to learn, because that's the person who wins every time. It's not the talented person.
Yeah.
It's the animal who's voracious and can't get enough information, because you pair that with caring, mm-hmm. you're going to get the technical stuff.
Yeah, and I think natural talent is something that's a little dangerous to overvalue too, even in yourself, because it can become a crutch and it can become an excuse, And I think that, like you said, like focusing more on like, well, okay, great, I can sing in tune pretty easily, but like, what is, okay, great. Now, what do you do with that tool? You know what I mean? Like, naturally you have some talent, but whatever. So do other people. Like, there is no replacement for experience and time spent and, like the hunger, like you're sort of talking about, to refine those things.
Yeah, especially with singing, right? The amount of people who could sing well. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people that can sing well.
Yeah.
And that's great. And, if you were just to go up to random people on the street, most of them, more than half of them, would not be able to sing well. But once you get into the music world or amongst artists or creatives, you should be able to sing well. Like, that's like, that should be like the baseline. And then from there, how willing are you to learn? And I think a lot of it's luck when it comes down to mentors. I had the same exact experience as you growing up. My mother was the band leader, I guess, in the church group. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the choir, although I was always mystified by the organ. My gosh, it's like, there can't be an airplane that has more controls and foot pedal.
The pedals. I mean, 3 staves. When you look at the notated music for it, and there's 3 staves. Like I can barely get by reading the 2. The bass and treble clef, and you just see this 3rd one beneath, and you're like, how are you doing this? It's like pedal steel or something. Yeah.
I could still picture the woman who used to play it all the time. She never wore shoes, and mm-hmm. Hair was super ratty and nesty, and
it's amazing.
She would set these religious moods, which was helpful, because that was the only thing probably keeping me from running away for some years, was the music. And my mother's group they called themselves the folk group. So they would take the songs, the traditional hymnals and all this, and do acoustic guitar versions of them. So 2 guitars.
I love that.
Sometimes a piano. Once in a blue moon, someone would roll up with like a horn. Gotta have the tambourine in there just to get a little liveliness, or as lively as you can get in a Catholic church.
It was Catholic? I was going to ask what denomination.
Yeah, Catholic Church, Neptune, New Jersey, Holy Innocents Church. My mother was the band leader, and they used to rehearse at the house.
Wow.
So my earliest memories were acoustic guitars, mm-hmm. sad minor chord music, which mm-hmm. I ended up playing for most of my life, at least with the songs I was writing. So it was like the template for all like the moody stuff I got into later, like The Cure, mm-hmm. and like the stuff that really turned me, the Smiths, although maybe they're on another level. Johnny Marr, he's
undeniably
up here.
Yeah.
Johnny's up here. Did you get to see? I mean, he rolls into Asbury like once in a blue moon. Did you ever catch?
I
any
missed
of that
that tour. There was one where he did, and he played Starland too. And I was away on tour, and I was bummed that I didn't get to see that solo tour.
He is Johnny Marr.
Yeah.
He's probably the reason that I was like, I need to freaking step it up on guitar. I need to continue to play guitar. Him and maybe Peter Buck from REM. Those two guys. It's like they were like looking at me like, you step it
Pay
up.
attention.
Pay attention or get out of the way because we're here. So yeah, the Smiths, REM, The Cure. Although The Cure, you know, who cares about their guitar lines? Like they were all fun, but it was all about the bass line.
Yeah, for sure.
In The Cure.
And the sound of the bass too. Very unique, very cool.
What was his name? I mean, the guy who played for most of the years.
I'm not going to...
Badass Cure bass player. Let's just call him Badass Cure bass player. Playing it super low. It had all that grind on it. And, of course, the drummer just holding it down. Real pocket with some very tasty fills. They weren't coming off them, but when they came, you're like, oh, yes, thank you. And I hear that in a lot of the music, at least of a certain age group that's coming into the studio now, or bands that I get turned on to by the engineers here who are all like a million years younger than me. And I'm like, oh, so it's the 80s, but the thing that stood out about The Cure is like you could strip it all away, and that bass line was kicking your ass.
Yeah.
I finally got to see them. My wife took me. It wasn't even that many years ago. I wanted to go so many times when I was young. Maybe like the Disintegration tour. I mean,
okay.
And they were playing Giant Stadium. I wasn't even maybe 7th or 8th grade.
Wow.
And I was like, Mom. Because I knew kids who were going, because most of my whole life my friends were always like older and cooler, which is like I think that's the best position to be in when you're like the lamest one in the room. As long as you're not being annoying, that's like the spot you want to be, because you're always seeing the next step for yourself. And they were going, you know, it was The Cure at Giant Stadium. Maybe it was I guess it was the Disintegration tour, whatever the late 90s, late 80s was, like 89, 88 or something. They probably toured forever. This is back when bands would tour forever.
Yeah.
And my mother was like, I don't know. And I like named the one or two kids who had responsible parents. I'm like, well, Mark's mom is letting him go. And, you know, she played guitar with you at the church. So like, but then it was also at the same time that it's like, well, people are killing themselves to like the music of The Cure. So that might have even been true. Like, I don't know, but I felt like that was like a little bit of like establishment hype, or like mom or parent hype. It was like the prequel to like the PMRC and all of that, and labels on music, like you can't listen to this music is dangerous. So like, you know, people are committing suicide to The Cure because it's so depressing. I'm like, it's really not that depressing. I mean, it's some like lonely love songs, most of them. It's just like, oh, I wish. I'm like, that's pretty much how most kids and even adults at times feel, but that put the kibosh on it. She pictured like someone just like taking a dive off of like the upper deck of Giant Stadium, and she's like, oh no. I was so mad.
There's like that boogeyman demonization of just cultural elements that's just, I think, you know, always been, you know, like whatever it is. Yeah, well,
heavy metal got it.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
With satanic lyrics, you know, probably Ozzy Osbourne and all, like when that stuff was really big. When did it come back? It came back. Marilyn Manson. Yeah. Like, I haven't met anyone who hasn't been inspired for anything positive through art and music. Even if the art was gritty and like counterculture and satanic, quite honestly. Like, it was always just sort of challenging you. I never saw it. The people who struggled with their lives, that was usually an internal thing or a chemical thing or a brain thing, or their parents or lack of parents.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the thing about art is, you know, it's a discussion. It's like you can have an intention for your art, and it can mean something totally different to someone else. So I think to blame the art is a very interesting workaround, you know, where it's like, well, maybe this art was a factor in some negativity in your life, but it's not that. It's what it meant to you in that moment. And, you know, it's very subjective, and that's like an interesting way to sort of justify. But I think a lot of people and like, you know, parents and like, you know, maybe like now you'd say like the boomer generation, like, you know, like there's this idea of putting it in this easily understandable box. And it's like, well, in this lyric, it says something really aggressive or violent, so that's violent, that's bad. And it's like, well, maybe that's unpacking a whole other set of things that could be really useful in terms of like understanding your own feelings and why, and like whatever. But it's just like that's a really myopic way of defining something, especially in the category of art.
Well, you said it. You used the word boogeyman. It's like, and that's a very like authoritarian move, right? Having something to blame for what happens or for the way things are. Well, it can't be structural. It's got to be. It's that thing. It's Ozzy Osbourne. It's Marilyn Manson. It's Robert Smith. Can you imagine? That's like the it's like the most sensitive person ever.
People being like that, you'd be like, what? No,
I know, it's so funny.
Yeah,
I want to tell my mom. I still bust her chops about that. She's like, don't remind me. Don't remind me. Like she ripped down my posters. I had like all these Cure posters. I'm like, Mom, come on. Oh, the Cure. God bless the Cure. They're still doing their thing, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yes, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't that many years ago. I saw him. It was like MSG.
Wow.
And he's still got the makeup and the hair. I saw one interview with him. It was probably the sweetest thing ever. And I guess they were like, hey, like, what's the deal with that? That's my phone. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So you could hear the vibration. I guess I just need to turn the vibration off. But I didn't want to turn the phone off because Taylor gives us important information like 1984.
Yeah.
Dancing in the Dark and anything else she's going to yell at us for. What was I saying? I totally forgot what I was saying.
Talking about the Cure? Talking about...
Oh, I know. Oh, yeah, his look.
Yeah.
And they were like, because that was a big look, right? The whole like goth thing. Maybe, and I'm sure it's come back and recycled a million times. That was also part of my mom's fear. Like she saw people walking around like
with
looking like
looking
like zombies, and she's like, "That's depressing." Like I want you to be joyful.
I like that.
Not depressed.
That is just my take on it is it's depressing. Don't like it.
Yeah. So all my friends were like, all my friends are in like robes and like jet black hair, and I had on like a half shirt and like fluorescent colors. Because so I was always that dude.
Wow.
I remember going to see I guess my first rock and roll show was actually Morrissey.
Cool.
So the Smiths had just broken up, and then I went to go see Morrissey.
That's intense.
And again, I was like the like hypercolor, like surfer, like looking thing, even though I'd never surfed. I'm terrible. I tried it twice. It was a train wreck. But like that was my looks. My mom was so upset if I dressed depressing. And then I'm at like a Morrissey show, and it's just like, it's the ultimate expression of that. Everyone's just like holding flowers, and that was the craziest show.
Holding flowers.
Well, yeah, that was a big thing at his shows.
Yeah.
His shows would, and I'm
just
sure,
visualizing you there in the fluorescent outfit.
Dude, that was me. Put that image, that like high contrast image in your mind for.
That's great.
Except for maybe now, maybe I finally have blended in at some point. But like I was always the high contrast fellow in the situation, which goes to show like none of that shit matters. Look, appearance. Like it's so meaningless. People attach like a look to a lot of things, especially like punk rock. Like I was getting really into punk rock, and like punk is a mindset.
Absolutely.
Like there's a genre, punk, but that's far eclipsed by the mindset and the aesthetic. Oh, we're getting yelled at. Hold on a second.
Your camera just died.
Oh,
all right. Hold on. So, we can continue to talk. Is that cool?
Yeah, you can completely continue to talk. I can just change out the camera.
Good news, everybody.
Let me just switch over.
now it's just me.
You get to look at Erik Romero exclusively now. So you can hear both of us, I think, if I understood Taylor correctly.
Yeah, you're totally.
So the camera died. I can't believe that's the only thing that's technically gone wrong thus far. Oh, be careful. Can I help you with that?
I'm gonna just have to pop.
So this is Taylor, everyone.
Hello.
You're not seeing her, but you're hearing her.
All right.
It's because I gave her some of that whiskey. So now she's making a lot of mistakes.
No, this thing drained that battery this quick.
Oh, it's got that big display on it, yeah.
But the display wasn't on.
No, but
which is good. I do not want to look at myself.
It powers, like the whole camera just died.
Oh, you're back.
All right.
All right.
How do you know I'm back? How do you see
I can
that?
see the
I
viewfinder.
see it on the other side.
Oh, so can I. Oh, wait, no, that's yours.
Yeah. We got different
So
cameras.
freaking clueless.
But to piggyback off what you were saying about like wardrobe and then the ethos of a culture, or like a
I can also just cut this entire part out.
No, we're not gonna. No, we're not cutting anything out. This is real. This is real life. I think.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Is this real life?
Who knows anymore?
That's so true, dude. How we doing otherwise? Oh, watch your head.
Yeah, I know why.
That was Taylor's head, everybody.
That should be.
You can.
Oh, okay.
You can
Yeah.
continue your thought while we're working this out. Please do.
It's interesting because I think at times I've like really literally agreed with that, but I think something I've been sort of like learning more about and trying to understand more, because it's not something that super influences my own choices, is the idea of like fashion as a form of artistic expression. And I think that that's something that I'm lucky enough to be collaborating with some people that have kind of like opened my eyes to some elements of that. Like I said, for myself, it's not something that I've explored vastly in my life. I pretty much wear the same thing every day.
You do. So, ladies and gentlemen, Erik has the quintessential studio uniform, which, by the way, I wear most of the time too. I have like the
great job
This
on that.
this is like my fluorescent colors.
Yeah.
This is dark blue and maybe some gray pants. It's the very, it's the old man version of the studio uniform. But yeah, you wear the uniform.
I do.
For
many reasons.
I love the uniform.
For
I've been in
many,
love with
many
the
reasons.
uniform my whole life. I love it.
But in contrast to that, like I've worked with some artists too, where I've gotten to observe firsthand how like fashion and choosing how you present yourself for the day or for an experience or for a show has such a connection to how you communicate. It has such a connection to your self-confidence, your I don't know. It's been interesting for me over the last few years to sort of learn more about that, because it's something that I like I said, I've never explored too deeply, and just to like learn more about the idea of fashion and it being an art form and it being a form of self-expression that's totally valid is great. And
it's 100% valid. It's
and I wasn't
it's
disagreeing.
sculpture, it's painting, it's music, it's poetry. I was sort of probably why you were with the way you thought about it before you started getting your eyes open, where you just attached it, how people attach it to a scene.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, sheep. Like that sheep mentality,
Yeah.
which was, I've always been like, ah.
I was just saying I agree with you. I've just been like on this other tangent recently, which has been really great to learn more about. But yeah, totally. And I think defining people by their choices of clothing, or using your choices of clothing to make you feel like fitting a definition, I don't know, but that can be very toxic. I understand exactly what you're saying, and we've all experienced that. And when I grew up, it was like they didn't have, when I was in high school, they didn't really make skinny jeans for dudes at that point. They had earlier, at that point it was more like baggier pants, so we all bought girls jeans to wear tight pants, because like awesome. In the punk and ska and central Jersey early 2000s drive-through records era, that was just like, well, I want to wear tight pants, I'm gonna go buy girls jeans, and like everyone did that, and it felt very niche, and sort of like that's what everyone in this scene is doing.
That's hysterical, because 10 years before, when I was doing it was total opposite.
Yeah,
it's like, what is the absolute largest pant?
Mm-hmm. Which is great too. I love that.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
They're all kind of funny. I mean, they're all funny.
It's all fucking comical. That's 100% right.
Yeah. I just love extreme. Like when something's like, this is what's cool now, I'm like, dope. Like I love this.
Extreme is fun.
Yeah.
And in fashion, that's absolutely true. We had an artist working with us recently, and a big part of her brand is her fashion and the look of the content they put out, and it's so freaking out there. Mm-hmm. And it's so cool.
I love it.
And you can't even cop it. Like it's so cool and interesting that you can't even cop it. It's like, oh, I want to dress like, said artist. No, you can't. Mm-hmm. It's because it's so far out, and that's when it's
inspiring. I think it's inspiring.
Like those runway shows, right? I mean,
sure.
You look at these things and you're like, that is the least practical item, but that's not the idea.
Yeah.
It's about seeing the future.
Sure, and like allowing people to express themselves however they feel like, and I think that can be really inspiring too. Like even when you meet, for instance, someone like I use an artist as an example, but that might be like socially very shy, but can make these very bold choices in their wardrobe, and that's the way that they choose to show their confidence and express themselves. Like what an inspiring thing. It's like, oh, it doesn't all fit into boxes like we were just saying, and it's not just about being gregarious or extremely extroverted. You can share who you are in so many ways, and I think that's really inspiring, especially to someone like me who's not ventured down that path very much in their
You're
life.
wearing the uniform. I mean, the most radical thing, let's see, the most radical thing you have going on is that you're wearing, I don't know, is it cuffs or short sleeve?
It's a long sleeve shirt that I rolled up.
All right, well then there's nothing.
Yeah.
You got nothing radical.
Nothing.
I thought you were wearing a short sleeve shirt, which would be very radical in the studio uniform world.
Yeah.
I'm gonna roll mine up a little bit.
I have one underneath, just in case it gets too warm. But I will say there is something radical for those who know me about my outfit right now.
Let's see.
Is I'm wearing these very cheap, lightweight sneakers, which I usually just wear the same pair of Doc Martens for like the last 5 years straight.
Of course.
But I went hiking a few weeks ago, and I think I hurt my Achilles in my left foot. So like when I was wearing the boots when I got home, it was kind of aggravating that. So I've been wearing these like running shoes for the last few weeks.
You're probably not going to go back.
I'm going to, absolutely, yeah.
I don't know, dude.
That
Those
was-
look really nice.
They're-
Says the guy who's, wearing
Yeah.
it. I mean, I still got the uniform.
Maybe I will. We'll see. But I think
look
my
nice. They
plan
look
currently
nice.
is to go back. I just this is self care, taking care of my body right now. So at the sacrifice of the uniform.
Dude,
Yeah.
I'm 44, and every couple months I feel like the crush of time on my body. It's like, okay, major adjustment. I guess I have to stretch every morning when I wake up, or I'm completely fucked for the rest of the day. Okay.
Yeah.
It's so funny. My kids make fun of me. Like, Daddy, why? I'm like, you'll see.
You'll understand.
You'll understand, which like every parent says, and it's like the lamest.
Yeah.
It's the lamest answer ever, and I use it all the time.
Yeah.
Well, when you get older, you'll understand. It's like you might as well just be going blip 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 blip.
Yeah.
Like it's Peanuts
Oh, I-
teacher. Wah wah. It's that.
I hated
I say
hearing
it.
that.
I say it though.
I still hate hearing that in some ways, but I think there are things I'm realizing why people said that now as I get a little older.
Well, sometimes there's just nothing else to say.
Yeah, I just always I wanted to be treated with like egalitarian cerebral respect, and I was like, no, you can explain it to me. I'll understand it. Don't just say that. As a child or a young adult, that was my stop with this whole you'll understand when you're older. Just explain it to me. Use your words, and that was my resistance to that. But
Well, the trap there is that because I do enjoy, especially with my one son who, from day one, he wanted the cerebral respect answer.
my guy.
He's as punk as it gets. He and I are going to get into the biggest fist fight ever as soon as he's of age. So I would take him. I would be like, all right, let's get into it. But then you run into the problem of when you get to the end, they're like, that's the dumbest thing ever.
Yeah.
And you have to then go right back to where you started.
You'll
You'll when you get older. So you got to be careful, dude. You don't have kids, so I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear it from you.
I don't have any platform
You'll
be
see.
saying any of
You're
these
gonna be
things.
saying it like crazy.
I just have my own perspective and where I am right now.
We got to put one of those dog collars on you. Like, every
Yeah.
time you say it, you're like,
Yeah. No, we'll see. We'll see. It's my goal not to, but I probably won't make it.
I threw all my goals out the window after having
But
kids.
but I will say there have been things I've realized in the last 5 years where I'm like, well, when the person said you'll understand when you're older, I now do understand some of these things, as
And it's not even the words that you use. I mean, ultimately, a mentor's words are meaningless. It's their actions.
Absolutely.
You mentioned Chuck and all those
Yeah.
other people. It wasn't that they were asking you the question about the drums you wanted. They were freaking at the store
putting
and then
the
at your
time in.
house
Yeah.
setting it up.
The actions
So
are
it's the
everything.
actions. So
Absolutely.
words are just sort of a shortcut.
Mm-hmm.
And it also helps separate, who's doing the real work and who's, yapping.
And those words, you'll understand when you're older, mean something very differently when they're coming from someone that has not backed up those actions and formed a sort of well, I do believe they have my best interest, compared to someone who you're like, I'm kind of upset that they said it that way, but I know they've always followed through, and they have my best interest at heart, and maybe I'll just I'll go with this for now, and it's put my stuff aside. Those are very, and that's a good point too. Like
It's heavy.
the actions themselves will have a huge impact on what the words, the weight they even carry. You know.
Well, you'll let things slide. Something someone says, you'll let it slide because you respect them.
Absolutely.
And you know that, all right, well, they just said that. Like the amount of times that someone has said something super shitty to me, or I've offended someone in the worst way, and then ultimately you get over it saying, all right, well, I know that person's core. Like, these are just words they're using, and I no doubt will say dumb, offensive things on this podcast if it continues after today. And I maybe already have. But, you know, I mean,
but then
we're
also,
fallible. We're fallible things.
Absolutely.
Fallible creatures.
But then also to have the self-awareness and courage to look back on it, admit you were wrong, maybe even have a conversation about how you were wrong with that. Like, that goes so much further. Like, for me to have someone do something that hurts me and then be willing to talk about it, or for me to hurt someone else and then be willing to talk about it and kind of unpack why we even got there, that narrative has so much more to it than even just never having done the thing in the first place. You know what I mean? I think that the courage to just say, and I mean, I will say this, 2020 I've been longing for this energy more than ever. Just the ability to say, you know what? I was wrong. Like, that's such a great thing as a human, and such a counter-human thing to do. But what a great thing for your ability to understand who you are, and for other people to sort of understand who you are, to be able to admit you were wrong.
It chips away at the ego, which is
an important
the raging artifact of our species.
Yeah.
I think it's unique, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Maybe they'll find some things in animals or aliens at some point, but
Both.
yeah, that's the distinct marker.
Yeah,
is awareness of death, probably, which might be the reason for ego.
Yeah.
Once you realize, like, oh, I gotta watch my back and all this. Yeah, chipping away at that's important. I remember when I was in high school, I didn't do a lot of like psychedelic drugs, but
but
I remember there was a short period with LSD, and I remember the biggest the takeaway from that really was like a chipping away at the ego and a sense of connection to everything, maybe nature mostly, but just to everything. And I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. I mean, it was like a little crazy, but
that seems to be a really defining thread for most people I know who've like experimented with psychedelic drugs. Like a lot of like ego loss. I'm not saying this because I'm on a podcast, but I have never really partaken in any psychedelic drugs. I've done a lot of stupid things in my life. Not that that's stupid, but I've done a lot of things in my life. Never those, but the group of my friends that I've talked to about it have said something very similar. And I think that's fascinating.
It is fascinating. I was so young. I mean, maybe I was like 15 or 16. Actually, I can connect this to Nicole Atkins after... It was after one of the rehearsals of The Sound of Music, or maybe it was the premiere. Like we were leaving the theater or the gym, whatever they converted, and we were packed in a car, and it was already all the people who were like dressed like The Cure and all that. Anyway, but now we're in like costumes, and we're wearing makeup for real, and we just ate a bunch of acid, and then got in the car, and we were going to this guy's house, and we got pulled over by the police.
Oh my gosh.
Immediately, like right outside Belmar. It's like one of those classic speed trap things. And the guy has the light in the car.
You're freaking out.
We're eating acid and we're wearing...
Oh, so you're not freaking out yet.
No. But I was nervous because I had never done anything like that. So I was having a little bit of anxiety. But I was with people I trusted.
Probably a little bit of anxiety.
A little bit of anxiety. And then like the police pull us over and they're shining the light. We're like, got the makeup on. There's drugs in our mouth, and he's like, what are you guys doing? And we're like, oh, we're just leaving the performance of blah blah blah. And he's like, oh, he had something like, oh my gosh, my niece was in that or went to see it. You guys are doing a great job, have a great night.
Oh gosh,
and he like gave us the pat on the back, and that's like a story of my life. Is like that scene right there. There was like so many of those things in my life, and then we ended up just driving to my buddy's house. And I will say, if you're going to go into that realm, it's important to have people who are responsible around you, preferably sober, who are like keeping an eye on you and keeping you in check, because you can go in a few different directions. I went in positive directions, and it was really beautiful. I mean, it's funny. I was talking to my wife. This is pre-kids. We were living in Neptune City. Maybe it was like right before we got married or something. And she found she was going through like her old college books. She's a scientist, and at the time a chemistry major, and she was a chemist for some years after that. But in a book, she finds a tab of acid in a chemistry book, which is perfect. And I remember she's like, and we're looking at it, and we're like, oh, should we should we eat it? Yeah. And then it's like, and then thank God she's responsible. I certainly would have been like, and figured it out later, maybe 16 hours later, outside naked or something. But thank God she's so responsible. Like, her response wasn't like, no, we shouldn't do it because it might be like, we might not be able to control what happens. It was more like, well, I don't know how that's going to degrade over time, and it might have absorbed some of the ink from it was like the most sciencey,
practical,
just
great. Just
so
what
I
you
don't think
needed.
we should do it. So it was almost like a maybe not an important pet, but like a fish died. We're like, all right, well let's bury it or something. Like, we put it outside.
Have a ceremony.
Like a mild ceremony, like no tears, but just like respect.
Yeah, like what you could have been, we will always remember.
What you could have been.
Yeah.
So
I love
that.
So
maybe let me know if you go that route, but have and I say this to everybody, it's important to have I think responsible people around, because when you're reaching another dimension in your mind, which is clearly a natural place, it exists there already. It's more like a veil comes off or something like that. You can go a few different ways.
Yeah.
Speaking of going a few different ways, how do we get on this? You released recently a single of your own music. So I know you work with a million people, and you've done a lot of things, and you produce, you engineer, you tour with some of the bands that you produce and engineer. Mm-hmm. But you recently put out something of your own.
Yes.
Which, it was interesting. I saw on Instagram, I guess you had advertised it, and I always try and listen to everything that I see advertised, because when I advertise something, I hope that people listen to what I'm doing. And I was trying to think of what it would sound like. So I was already trying to put you in a box and figure out what it was going to be. It was not what I expected at all. So you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. So I don't know. I've always been so wrapped up in collaboration that I feel like having an identity of what I am or what my art looks like is not a discussion I've had with myself very often. I'm usually playing in bands that are either other people's music, or I'm collaborating to make some sort of synthesis of what we all like. And I think maybe the two biggest polar factors of what I gravitated to is any kind of identity or genre are usually something like punk rock related or something very folk singer-songwriter related. And I think that just comes from all the records I grew up listening to with my mom, which is just Neil Young and Simon and Garfunkel. That's what I grew up with, the Beatles. And then the culture of when I grew up playing in bands was just punk, pop punk, ska, hardcore, all that. So those are kind of the two things that I just find myself being well, this is part of the fabric of who I am. So to be honest, this is what I'm going to make. And I'm very fortunate to be one of the bands the project I kind of am largely dedicating myself to as a songwriter right now is a band called Still Hungry that I'm in with two of my friends, and it's a very singer-songwriter type of band, and it's very lyric and chord based and satisfying a lot of my desire to just experiment with songwriting. And I felt like this huge missing element of I just want to yell about stuff and not care about what inversion I'm playing. I just want to play some power chords and yell. And quarantine happened, and I've had a notes doc on my phone with just a zillion lyrics anytime I think of something, and there's some more aggressive ones in there, and I was like, I'm just gonna sit down and try and make a project that I'm not gonna worry too much about, just to get out some of this desire I have to just do something more aggressive. And that's kind of what happened. And I wrote a couple songs. I'm actually in the process of releasing another one for it, I think hopefully in the next couple weeks.
What's the best way for people to sort of find
So
what you're doing?
So it's not actually on Spotify or anything. I made the choice because it is such a personal project that
I noticed that
I'm not going to be touring, and I'm not really interested in sort of PRing it all. It's more for me and like anyone that knows me that would like to listen to it. I released it exclusively on Bandcamp so that I can control that all of the purchases of it are going to I think Southern Poverty Law Center. So anyone that buys any of the music or chooses to, I think it's name your own price, so they can also listen to it for free. I just wanted to make sure that it was not coming to me, because this is not really like, I'm not trying to make it a business. I'm in several bands that we're trying to be successful, as like putting, gaining fans and running it as a business. So for that, it's just on Bandcamp. I think it's just Light Sleeper is the name of the band. Might be Light Sleeper NJ, on Bandcamp. I'll verify that. But I'm only going to be releasing them that way, just so that I can control the monetization of it and be able to pass it on. But yeah, so I released one song called Poison Myself, and it was, I ended up including a few of my friends. I kind of like wrote a lot of the parts and demoed them out, and there's a few friends that I have collaborated with and recorded in various projects and wasn't currently playing in a band with. So I was like, I would love to have a couple of these people just donate their voice as a musician to this, and if we ever play shows, they'll be the people to play. But it was my best friend Natalie, who I do now play in a band with, and then my very, very close friends John Rodney and Steve Omark. So they all collaborated on that as well, and Natalie shot the video. So it wasn't a totally isolated thing, but I wrote all the songs and the core of them kind of just when quarantine started as an outlet. I think that's yeah. But it's fun. It's just kind of like fun, loud music.
Well, people should check out your fun, loud music. I respect that. Thank you, Erik Kase Romero, the premiere of Through the Glass. Thanks for keeping up your end of the deal as being the first guest.
Absolutely. It was an honor.
It's been cool hanging out with you. Thanks for the whiskey.
Of course.
I'm going to drink more of that.
I'd like to thank you, and thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this. And I'd also, as well, like to thank Lake House and John and Juan, and I have a lot of history here, and it's really amazing to be able to come back and be creative and enjoy time here. So,
all right, there you have it. That's a wrap. Bye.